The notification came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was 3 hours deep into a board call with our Singapore office. My phone buzzed on the desk beside my laptop, screen lighting up with a text from my brother. I glanced at it briefly. Birthday dinner Saturday. Rachel picked the place. Harvest and Vine, 7 p.m. Please come. Mom's been asking about you. I set the phone back down and finished the call. Afterward, I pulled up the operations dashboard my assistant kept open on my second monitor, the one that ran real-time status on all our properties. I typed in the name, Harvest and Vine. There it was, table of 12, Saturday at 7, reserved under Sullivan. Sullivan, my family's name. My brother was throwing his birthday party at a restaurant I owned. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the water stain on the ceiling of my home office, the one I kept meaning to fix and never did because I was always in a different city. The irony settled over me slowly, the way cold water fills a glass. My sister-in-law had picked the venue herself. I knew this because my brother's text said so, and because my sister-in-law picked everything herself. The flowers at their wedding, the neighborhood they moved to, the private school their daughter now attended. She had an eye for things that projected success. And Harvest and Vine was exactly the kind of place that made people feel like they had arrived somewhere. She had no idea that the woman she had spent 6 years calling a disappointment to my brother's face was the one who had quietly acquired the restaurant's parent company 14 months ago. I typed back to my brother, "I'll be there." Then I closed the laptop, walked to my kitchen, and made myself a cup of tea. My headache, which had been building since noon, suddenly felt much more manageable. To understand why any of this mattered, you have to understand my sister-in-law. She came into my brother's life when I was 22, and he was 28, and she arrived the way a certain kind of person always does, with tremendous confidence and a very clear sense of the hierarchy she intended to establish. She was not unkind in the conventional sense. She never raised her voice. She smiled at family dinners. She remembered birthdays, including mine, though her gifts always carried a faint subtext. One year, she gave me a book about building confidence. Another year, a planner with color-coded sections for life goals. She was a pharmaceutical sales manager, which she mentioned often, and she was very good at her job, which I respected genuinely. She had built a stable, comfortable life for herself and my brother, and she believed, with the kind of certainty that requires no evidence, that she had the clearest possible vision of what success was supposed to look like. I did not look like it. I had dropped out of college during my junior year. This was, in her telling, the original sin, the moment when my story became a cautionary tale she was happy to recite. She never mentioned the reason I left. She never mentioned the software I had spent 18 months building in my apartment, the one that a logistics firm in Atlanta had paid me $160,000 to license before my 22nd birthday. She didn't know about that part, because I hadn't told anyone in my family about it. Not my mother, not my brother, not anyone. I was private about my work in a way that probably looked, from the outside, like I had something to hide. My company, the one I built from that first licensing deal, was called Meridian Group Holdings. It was not a household name. I had deliberately kept it that way. We acquired small and mid-size hospitality businesses, restaurants, boutique hotels, event spaces that were fundamentally sound but poorly managed, restructured them quietly, and either ran them or resold them at a significant profit. We were the silent engine behind 12 different brands across 6 states. No press, no profile. My CFO had been begging me for 2 years to let him pitch a Forbes feature. I kept saying no. The result was that to my family, I was still the college dropout who did something vague with investments. My sister-in-law had once described my career to her mother, within my earshot, as day trading, basically. I had let her believe it. It was easier than explaining, and somewhere in me, younger and more wounded than I liked to admit, there was a part that was still waiting for the right moment to stop explaining and simply show them. Saturday, it seemed, was going to be that moment. I spent Thursday and Friday the way I always spent the days before something I needed to be ready for. I worked. I cleared my inbox, approved a financing package for a property we were acquiring in Nashville, and had a long call with the general manager of Harvest and Vine, a man I had hired personally 18 months ago, when we completed the acquisition. I did not tell him that members of my family would be dining there Saturday. I did ask him to ensure the private dining room was staffed by his most senior team. He assured me it would be. I arrived 10 minutes late on Saturday, which I did intentionally. The private dining room at Harvest and Vine seated 14 and was lit by pendant lights that cast everything in warm amber. When I pushed open the door, the conversation at the table was already running at full volume. My mother saw me first. She half rose from her chair and waved with both hands the way she always did, as though I might not notice her otherwise. My brother grinned and raised his glass. My sister-in-law looked up from the menu, her expression moving through a brief sequence: surprise, recalibration, welcome smile in about 2 seconds flat. "You made it," she said. Her tone carried the particular warmth of someone genuinely pleased to see a prop arrive on time. I took the open seat between my mother and a cousin I hadn't seen in 3 years. My sister-in-law was at the far end of the table, next to her best friend from work, a woman I had met twice before and who always seemed faintly surprised that I existed. "You look tired," my sister-in-law said, tilting her head. "Are you sleeping?" "Just busy," I said. "Still doing the investment stuff?" her friend asked. "More or less," I said. My sister-in-law smiled. "She's very mysterious about it," she told her friend, as though I wasn't there. "We can never get a straight answer about what she actually does." She laughed lightly. "Honestly, I keep telling my brother-in-law to just get her a referral to our financial planner. He's wonderful. He does a lot of work with people who are figuring out their direction. I was 29 years old. I had been running a company for 7 years. "That's very thoughtful," I said. The evening unfolded the way my sister-in-law's evenings always did, organized around her. The food was excellent, which I knew it would be because I had approved the menu concept myself when we onboarded the new executive chef. She ordered confidently, with the authority of someone who felt at home in nice restaurants, and she directed the conversation with practiced ease. My brother's accomplishments were noted: his promotion, his new car, a vacation they were planning to Portugal. My sister-in-law's own wins were threaded in with what I had to admit was real skill, nothing so blunt as bragging. Just a constant, gentle curation of a narrative where they were ascending and everyone else was positioned accordingly. About an hour in, somewhere between the main course and dessert, the conversation turned to my cousin's new job. He had just started at a financial firm downtown and was clearly proud of it, talking about his salary band and the company's growth trajectory, with the enthusiasm of someone who had recently discovered that adults were allowed to talk about money openly. "It's so exciting," my sister-in-law said warmly. "A real career with a real future. That's what you want at this stage." She looked down the table in my direction. Her smile was perfectly calibrated, kind, slightly pitying. Not everyone finds their footing at 22. Some of us take a little longer. My mother's hand moved on the table beside mine. "It's never too late to get on track," my sister-in-law continued. "That's what I always say. There's no shame in starting over." She wasn't looking at me anymore. She didn't need to. The words had already landed exactly where she'd aimed them, as they always did. The table was quiet for a moment. My brother glanced at me. He had the expression he always wore when his wife and I were in the same room, a kind of careful, guilty neutrality, like a man standing too close to a fault line. I looked at my wine glass. I thought about my father, who had died 4 years ago from a heart attack, and who had been the only person in my family who had understood, even without the details, that I was building something real. He used to say, "The tallest trees don't need to announce themselves. They're just there when you need the shade." I had spent 6 years being the tallest tree in a room where no one had thought to look up. I set down my glass. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice easy and light, "I've been pretty busy. We just closed a deal in Nashville last week, and we're about to start due diligence on a second acquisition in the same market." My sister-in-law tilted her head. "Due diligence," she repeated, with the faint condescension of someone who had heard a child use a grown-up word. "Is that the investment group you're always referencing?" "It's my company," I said. "Meridian Group Holdings. We're in hospitality." "Hospitality," her friend echoed, with polite interest that stopped just short of actually being interested. "Like event planning?" "More like acquisition and operations," I said. "We acquire restaurant groups, boutique hotels, event venues. Restructure them. Run them. Or divest." "How many 12 brands currently," I said. 4 hotels, 8 restaurant groups, about 900 employees across the portfolio, not including contract staff. The table went quiet in a different way than it had before. My sister-in-law laughed a small, incredulous sound. 900 employees, she said. That's quite a statement. It's quite a company, I said. She looked at me steadily. I could see her running the math, the way people did, when a number didn't fit the story they had already written. I had no idea you'd built something that substantial, she said carefully. You've never really mentioned specifics. I know, I said. I don't talk about it much. Why not? My mother asked, and her voice was small and a little hurt, and I felt the question go right through me. I took a breath, because it never seemed like the right time. And because I paused, I think somewhere I was still trying to prove it to myself before I tried to prove it to anyone else. There was a beat of silence. Then the general manager appeared in the doorway of the private dining room, right on the schedule I had not set for him, but which his professionalism had apparently dictated anyway. He was a tall man in a charcoal blazer, and he scanned the table briefly before his eyes settled on me with the immediate recognition of an employee who knows the owner of the company. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," he said. "I just wanted to check in and make sure everything had been to your satisfaction this evening." He was looking directly at me. My sister-in-law looked at him, then at me, then back at him, the small furrow in her brow deepening. "Everything's been wonderful," I said. "The lamb was exceptional. Please tell the kitchen." "Of course," he said. "And congratulations again on the Nashville acquisition. We heard through the team, it's a beautiful property." He gave a small nod and left. The silence he left behind was a specific kind of silence. I had been in enough rooms to know what it sounded like when a story cracked open and the light started getting in. My sister-in-law set down her fork. "He spoke to you like she owns the place," my cousin said, slowly, almost to himself. Then, "Do you own the place?" "Meridian acquired the parent company of Harvest and Vine 14 months ago," I said. "We own 6 locations. This is the flagship." My sister-in-law stared at me. Her friend stared at me. My brother made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. "You've been sitting here all evening," my sister-in-law said, her voice very controlled, "at a restaurant you own, and you didn't say anything?" "You pick the venue," I said. "I didn't want to make it awkward." "It's awkward now," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry for that part. I could have stopped there. I could have let the revelations settle and let the evening dissolve into the slightly stunned pleasantness that sometimes follows a large shock. And I had intended to, going into that dinner. I had told myself the goal was not confrontation. The goal was simply to exist as I actually was, for one evening, without apology. But my sister-in-law was not finished. She set her napkin on the table with a careful precision that I recognized as the beginning of a recovery. "Well," she said, her voice finding its footing again. "That's impressive, truly. I'm glad it's gone so well." She looked around the table with a smile that included everyone and excluded no one, which was her great skill. "I just wish you'd been more open about it. It's a little strange to keep something like that secret from family. Don't you think? It makes people worry." She was pivoting. The shock had passed its peak, and she was redirecting, transforming my reveal into a flaw of character, a failure of openness, a concern to be managed. "It must be lonesome," she continued, "to carry something that big alone, to not feel like you could share it." She looked at me with the expression she had refined over years, the one that said, "I am concerned about you," and that concern is, by definition, a form of superiority. I thought of the planner she had given me with the color-coded life goals sections. I thought of her describing my career as day trading, basically. I thought of every family dinner where she had gently, persistently rewritten the story of who I was into something manageable, something that made her version of success look correct by comparison. "I'd like to tell you something," I said. "And I want to say it now because I should have said it a long time ago, and because the people at this table deserve to know." My mother looked at me. My brother looked at me. "The restaurant is not the only thing," I said. "I started with my parents' house. 3 years ago, my parents' mortgage had come up for refinancing during a stretch when my father's health was declining and my mother had reduced her hours to care for him. The bank had been difficult. The numbers hadn't worked. I had structured an acquisition of the note through a subsidiary. Technically I owned the debt, But I'd locked the payments at a rate my mother could afford and had been quietly covering the gap myself every month since. My mother's hand went to her mouth. "The mortgage has been paid in full as of 8 months ago," I said. "The deed is in your name, Mom. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." "Why?" my mother whispered. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me something," I said. "I just wanted you to have the house." I looked at my brother. "The consulting firm you started 3 years ago," I said. He blinked. "The one that almost didn't survive its first year because you couldn't get a line of credit from any traditional lender." He was very still now. "I introduced your CFO to a contact of mine. Through a holding entity. The working capital loan that saved the business, I was the lender." My brother's face did something I had never seen it do before. It crumpled, just for a moment, before he caught it. "You've been growing it yourself ever since," I said. "That was your work." I just opened the door. My sister-in-law was looking at her husband. She was very quiet. "Rachel," I said, and I used her name because this part was important, and I needed her to hear it clearly. "I know you work hard. I know you love my brother, and I know you've built a good life together. None of what I'm saying tonight is meant to take that away from you." She looked at me. Her composure was intact, but there was something behind it now, something stripped and uncertain. "But for 6 years," I said, "you have sat at tables and described my work as a hobby. You've suggested I see financial planners. You've introduced me to people as the one who is still figuring things out. And you've done it in front of my mother, in front of my family, with such quiet confidence that I started to wonder if you believed it because you needed it to be true." The room was silent except for the low sound of the restaurant on the other side of the wall. "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant it, more than I expected to. "I'm just tired of being a cautionary tale in a story I didn't write. I built something real. I've been building it for 7 years. And the people I love the most have had no idea." My brother stood up from his chair. He walked around the table, and he pulled me into a hug the way he used to when we were kids, and something had gone wrong, with both arms and no hesitation. "I'm sorry," he said into my shoulder. "I should have asked more. I should have pushed harder to know." "It's okay," I said. "You're here now." When we stepped back, my sister-in-law was looking at her plate. Her friend had excused herself quietly a few minutes ago and not returned. The rest of the table was watching with the careful silence of people who understand they are witnessing something private and real. My mother came around the table and took my face in both her hands, the way she had when I was small, and she wanted me to really listen. 900 people, she said. 894 as of last week, I said. She laughed, and it broke into crying, and I held her for a long time. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. My brother called me the next morning, early, before I'd had my first coffee. He asked questions, real ones, careful ones, the kind a person asks when they are genuinely trying to understand something rather than manage it. I answered all of them. We talked for 2 hours. My sister-in-law texted me 3 days later. It was a short message. I said things over the years that weren't fair. I want you to know I understand that now. I don't expect you to forgive it all at once. I read it twice. Then I called her instead of texting back. I don't need an apology, I said. I need you to know that I've always respected what you've built. I just needed the same thing back. There was a long pause. That's fair, she said. Her voice was different without the performance in it. Just a person, tired, trying to mean something. My company runs a leadership development program for women in mid-career, I said. We partner with a few outside facilitators. Your background in pharmaceutical sales is actually a strong fit for one of the modules we're developing. It would be paid consulting. If you're interested. Another silence. You're offering me work. I'm offering you a conversation, I said. We can see if it becomes work. She said she would think about it, and I believed her. The true resolution came 6 weeks later, at my mother's house for Sunday dinner, the first one we'd had there in 2 years. Everyone around the same table. My mother had made the roast she reserved for occasions she considered worth the effort. My cousin brought his fiancée. My brother sat close to his wife with the careful, deliberate nearness of a person trying to be present. Before we ate, my mother stood at the head of the table. She was not a woman who made toasts. She held her glass with both hands, and she looked around at all of us with an expression that was something past proud, something older and more tired and more true. "I want to say something," she said. "Your father used to tell me that the people who do the most are usually the ones you hear from least. He said that's how you know they're actually doing it." She looked at me. I didn't understand that for a long time. I think I was so worried about my daughter that I forgot to see her. Her voice broke on the last word, and she let it. "I see you now." I should have been looking sooner. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Later, while we were washing dishes, my sister-in-law came and stood beside me at the sink. She picked up a dish towel without being asked and started drying. We worked in silence for a while. "The consulting program," she said finally. "I've been thinking about it. And I think I'd like to try," she said. She was not looking at me, just at the plate in her hands. "I think I need to build something of my own. Not for any reason other than, I think I've been standing close to other people's accomplishments for too long and calling it a life." It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. "That's a good place to start," I said. She nodded. We kept washing dishes. Outside the kitchen window, the sun was doing something useful with the early November light, making everything look briefly like it was worth keeping. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from my Nashville general manager about a permit issue on the new property. I looked at it, then turned it face down. It could wait. For the first time in longer than I could calculate, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Not the cautionary tale, not the punchline, not the family mystery to be worried about. Just a person, standing at her mother's sink, in the quiet and specific peace of being, finally, fully known. My father had been right. The tallest trees don't need to announce themselves. They just have to be patient enough to let someone look up.